TFA fam, welcome back. We're on to week 11, so that means time for some of our week 11 wide receiver rankings, and they are as follows: Tyreek Hill, Amon-Ra St. Brown, CeeDee Lamb, AJ Brown, Justin Jefferson, Jamar Chase, Keenan Allen, Stephon Diggs, Cooper Kupp, Brandon Ayuk, Mike Evans, and Jalen Waddle, wrapping up our top 12. Cody, you know what to do. Hit us with the good stuff.
Yeah, obviously, if you have any of these guys, you're plugging them in. So I'm not going to go too deep on the wide receiver ones for this week. But to start off, I did just want to highlight what an absolute tear that CeeDee Lamb has been on the past 3 weeks. So heading into their bye week, CeeDee Lamb had 475 yards and 1 touchdown before the bye. In the 3 games after their bye week, CeeDee Lamb has 500 receiving yards and 4 touchdowns. He's been wide receiver 2, 4, and 2 in those games and have PPR scoring. He's just been otherworldly since coming out of that bye week. So just wanted to shout him out. Justin Jefferson, would expect him to return this week with getting in 3 straight limited practices last week. I'm still tempering expectations slightly, even with Dobbs going off last week. He's still a wide receiver 1, still locked into your lineups. I have him a little bit lower in my wide receiver 1 rankings, but he's a wide receiver 1 nonetheless. And then someone that I'm a little bit higher on than Kev that I have in my wide receiver 1s is Devonta Smith. Not a fantastic matchup, but we have Dallas Goedert doubtful. And last year in the games without Dallas Goedert, we saw Devonta Smith smash and really pick up his production. He posted a near 29% target share in the 5 games last year without Dallas Goedert. And we saw his yards per game average jump up by almost 20 yards. Like I said, the Chiefs have been one of the better defenses over the last several weeks, but I'm not hesitating to put Smitty into lineups where I have.
Yeah, let's keep it moving here. Let's jump over to the wide receiver 2s, and they are as follows: Devontae Adams, Devonta Smith, Garrett Wilson, Christian Kirk, DeAndre Hopkins, Terry McLaurin, Deebo Samuel, Puka Nacua, DK Metcalf, Adam Thielen, Tank Dell, and Nico Collins. So, same story, different tier. Let's hit this with the wide receiver 2s.
Yes, start off with Christian Kirk. Something we've been talking about all season long is kind of like where we rank Christian Kirk depends on what's going on with Zay Jones. Not only has Zay Jones been missing a lot of time because of a knee injury, but he also got picked up and arrested on a domestic battery charge on Monday. So who knows if we see him playing for the Jags for the rest of the season. But with him out of the way, Christian Kirk did not find the end zone last week, but he still racked up over 100 receiving yards. Calvin Ridley and how they're using him is just super frustrating. But now Christian Kirk gets a matchup against the Titans, who are allowing the 7th most half PPR points per game to wideouts, so you can just plug him in. Next up is going to be Terry McLaurin. He gets a matchup against the Giants, who have allowed the 3rd most fantasy points per game to wide receivers. I'm going to go out on a limb and say that Brian Robinson and Antonio Gibson don't combine for 11 for $160 and 2 scores again this week through the air like they did last week. That's obviously going to open up some production and more opportunity for Terry McLaurin. And we saw last week whenever the Cowboys went up against the Giants, like that was something that was being talked about in terms of Dak and CeeDee Lamb, how high do we put these guys? What's going to happen with this game script? They smashed. Everyone smashed. So I don't think that's anything we have to worry about here, especially with the Commanders. Next up is going to be Deebo Samuel. Tampa's run defense has held steady all year, but their secondary has gotten lit up, especially over the past several weeks. So I think we see more of what we saw last week with Deebo, where he had 4 targets and also 3 rush attempts. He scored on one of those rush attempts. So I think we could see him utilized here more on those end arounds and jet sweeps type of things where they're getting the ball in Deebo's hands to avoid running into the teeth of that Tampa defense. Lastly, we have Tank Dell and Nico Collins as back-end wide receiver 2s. I'm keeping them here just because I have no idea what to expect as far as target distribution goes here. I'm assuming Robert Woods is going to be the odd man out, and we see Noah Brown, Tank, and Collins in the 3 wide receiver sets. But we really haven't seen many snaps, and I don't know if we've actually seen any snaps with all 3 of these guys healthy and on the field at the same time. Noah Brown, we didn't want to chase those points from 2 weeks ago. He came back, had another really good outing last week too. So I would assume that Noah Brown becomes 3rd in the pecking order here, but I could just see CJ Stroud distribute the ball the way that he has been over the past couple of weeks. So having said that, they're all in a good spot here going up against Arizona.
Yeah, 100%. You couldn't ask for a much better matchup there for these guys. The other one I'll talk about is Adam Thielen. I'm not high on him at all. I have thought about putting him lower than a wide receiver. I mean, I have him as a wide receiver 3, but I almost put him a little bit lower than that. I mean, Dallas's defense, this feels like a spot where they're just going to absolutely annihilate the Panthers again. Another really bad offense, bad team. The Dallas defense playing very well. Adam Thielen's had a little bit of a drop off recently as well in terms of production. So I'm not nearly as high on Adam Thielen. It's possible that the sell window has officially closed on Adam Thielen, moving forward, but we'll see on that. Anyways, let's move over and so we can get out of here on the wide receiver 3s. Marquise Brown in a terrific spot here against Houston, and then DJ Moore, Cortland Sutton, Tyler Lockett, Amari Cooper, Deontay Johnson, Rashee Rice, Jordan Addison, Chris Godwin, Tyler Boyd, Calvin Ridley, and Jacoby Myers wrap up our wide receiver 3s. Cody, same thing. Wide receiver 3s. What are we seeing?
I'm going to start with Deontay Johnson here. Now, on paper, this does not look like a great matchup going up against Cleveland, but we need to pay attention to the actives and inactives because they could be without Denzel Ward and Juan Thornhill at the safety position, which would certainly make you feel better about starting Deontay Johnson. Since he has returned to the lineup and half PPR scoring, he was wide receiver 22, wide receiver 22, 6, and then 80 this past week with only seeing 4 targets. But I think in this matchup, we could see that open up a little bit more and get back to where he was prior to that, where he had 29 targets through his first 3 games back from returning from that hamstring injury. Cortland Sutton, someone else who has also had a strong 3 of past 4 games, where he has finished as a wide receiver 2 or better in 3 of the past 4, now gets a matchup against the Minnesota Vikings, allowing the 8th most half PPR points per game to wide receivers. If we know anything about this Vikings defense, it is that Brian Flores loves to blitz. But among quarterbacks with at least 30 dropbacks under pressure, Russell Wilson is actually leading the league in adjusted completion percentage. He's tied for 10th in yards per attempt, and he has 8 touchdowns to just 1 pick under pressure. So this is an interesting spot here for Sutton if you have to plug him in. Rashee Rice, he continues to be the best wide receiver for the Chiefs, and he continues to be underutilized. If he doesn't score a touchdown, he's likely going to put up minimal fantasy production, especially in half PPR or standard leagues. But lucky for him and any of you needing to start Rice this week, Philly is allowing the most fantasy points per game to wide receivers, and that also includes being tied for allowing the most touchdowns to wide receivers at 14. That is tied with the Washington Commanders. Tyler Boyd to wrap up the wide receiver 3s for me. I know Trenton Irwin is all the rage over the past 2 weeks, but Boyd is going to be in an interesting spot here, assuming that T. Higgins is out. It doesn't sound good for him on this quick turnaround on Thursday Night Football, but he's going to get a matchup against Arthur Mollett in the slot, who's allowed 192 receiving yards. That is the 19th most in terms of yards allowed from the slot. It doesn't sound like a lot. That's also with Mollett only facing 19 targets. So the Ravens are obviously stronger on the outside, so this could be another spot where we see Boyd see an uptick in opportunity for the second straight week after putting up over 100 yards receiving against the Browns last week.
Let's move over to some of the wide receivers past the wide receiver 3s. I think there's a few interesting spots to look at. The Chargers have really been torched through the air in recent weeks, and that's been one of the best ways to attack them. I'm still not going to play Christian Watson if I don't have to. I have to be pretty desperate there. I'm sure it'll be the week, when everybody's completely off and done with them, as when he'll finally have a good game. But I do think Jaden Reed and Romeo Doubs are both players you can look at playing as flex options this week. I think Quentin Johnson's also in that boat as well. And then other than that, I think there's some other spots you can look at. Rondell Moore saw 8 targets last week. They get a matchup against Houston this week. I think he's sort of in a pretty solid spot, as well as Michael Wilson is also in a fairly good spot as well. But Cody, do you have any guys you want to talk about that are past the wide receiver 3s?
No, I'm actually right there with you on Jaden Reed and the 2 Cardinals receivers. It's actually weird to see that Rondell Moore actually had an average depth of target that we actually care about. It was still only, I think it was 8.1, but that is still a lot better than what he has been in recent years. Just some other guys to touch on here quickly. Curtis Samuel jumped back into the lineup, and we saw him see 6 targets upon returning after his foot injury. So you can fire him up if you have to. Dotson, unfortunately, probably goes back to the bench in most leagues. If you are really desperate and you need a waiver wire pickup, Kev, you mentioned Quentin Johnson. I think you could also look at Jalen Guyton. He basically came off the street, saw 6 targets. He turned that into 41 yards and a score. You could certainly do worse if you need to go this far down and have a dart throw type of play being tied to Justin Herbert. And last, certainly least, now listen, I'm not saying that this guy is someone you should look at in 12-team leagues, maybe even not in 14-team leagues, depending on your starting requirements. But with Jalen Hyatt likely to miss with a concussion, if you're super, super desperate, we did see our old friend Isaiah Hodgins play a full-time role once Hyatt left with the concussion. He does get a juicy, juicy matchup against the Commanders. So again, it's not for 12-team leagues unless you have like some super deep, crazy starting requirements. 14-team leagues, like we're still borderline. So this is only for the folks that have to like really dig down deep. I know it can be frustrating for people who are, in more competitive leagues, 16-team leagues and higher. So there's one for you if you have to scrape the bottom of the barrel. And I just love Isaiah Hodgins. So any chance I get to talk about him, I'm going to do so.
Yeah, I mean, for the brand, this offseason hasn't worked out as well. But at the same time, this Giants offense has been a complete dumpster fire too. So with that being said, hope everybody has a good week 11. Obviously, we have a Thanksgiving slate next week, so things are going to be a little bit different next week and how content is distributed and everything like that, just because of the with all the games that are going on next week and everything that's going on. So be sure to hit that like and subscribe button for future content. We'll see you on the next one.